Welcome to yet another of our interviews with artists who will be on the studio tour this year. And joining us is Jeremy Jennings, a potter. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
You're a potter, okay. Jeremy, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think you're our 9th artist that's been through here. I think there's a total of 66 in the studio tour this year and 23 different studios. So thanks for coming in, and we have plenty of time and plenty of room to do many, many more of these. They've been a lot of fun, very interesting. I'm not a potter, but I loved it in high school. I love pottery in high school. Raku is my thing. Really enjoyed that. But looking forward to learning what you're doing. How many studio tours have you done?
This will be my second. Last year was my first.
And was that a good experience last year?
I'm doing it again.
Yeah?
Yeah. No, it was a good experience. We're really tucked away, so having people come and check out our place and my little tiny studio was kind of fun.
So you are one of the 23 studios?
Yeah.
Cool. Are you going to have any guest artists?
Yeah. I've got one guest artist this year. All of my guest artists from last year, well, my one guest artist from last year, Glenn Hendricks, went off and is having her own studio this year.
Mm-hmm. She was here last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit sad that I didn't go to hang out with her at her studio because that would have been a lot of fun, but it makes more sense to, show people what I'm doing in my space.
Yeah. So let's get into exactly what you're doing. Describe your style.
So I do wheel thrown, mostly functional ceramics. I have a very small studio, and then right outside I have a wood-fired kiln, and so it's high-fired stoneware. I work in a white clay body and a dark brown one, and to fire it, I pack up the kiln, seal it up, and then start a fire going that goes for between 10 and 14 hours on the day of firing, and I take it up to in pottery terms, between cone 9 or cone 14, so between 2,300 and about 2,450. And the fire and the wood ash interact with the clay and the glazes to make effects that you can't really get any other way. And my last couple firings, just to add a little bit of extra oomph, I've been adding some baking soda and to the fireboxes, which heightens the color effect a little bit.
So let's look at this cup that you brought here.
So like this cup, it's a white clay. It starts out kind of whitish gray on its own, and I've glazed it with a glaze made of wood ash from my fireplace and clay, and it's you see it's white at the top and kind of green glassy at the bottom, and the green glass is where it's gotten pretty hot.
Go ahead and tilt that.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty hot, and the ash starts to pool. It melts at a lower temperature than the clay does. And then on the outside, I can tell where this was approximately in the kiln. It must have had a pot here and a pot here, and a little jet of fire hit right there.
Now, is there glaze on the outside too?
So the outside is entirely unglazed,
Right.
except for what the wood ash and soda provides to the pot. So then the opposite shoulder, you got some wood ash settled on the shoulder of the pot.
Now, do you apply the wood ash while it's in the kiln, or is that coming up naturally from the fire?
Both.
Okay. So like this, almost like a burn mark is from the
Yeah.
fire, but some of that you have also applied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because everywhere gets different amounts of flame and ash contact. there are spots that get a lot of flame, and there are spots that get a lot of ash, and there are spots that don't get that much contact. And I like to have at least a little bit of that
Sure.
ash effect
That's
on
really
everything.
cool. Stupid question. So is the inside always glazed because it might hold a liquid?
Yeah, it'll hold liquid, just vitrified clay, I mean, it's turned to glass.
Even without?
It'll hold liquid without, but the inside is...
Easier to clean, probably.
It's easier to clean, it's smooth and glassy, so for functional ware, the inside is pretty much always glazed.
And this is a functional cup. You can
Yeah,
use it
it's a
every day?
functional cup. You
Right.
couldn't put it in your dishwasher, you can drink whatever you want out of it.
Cool.
It's not going to leach anything strange because it's really just, I only use the simplest of ingredients. My kids come into my studio all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that can be used in glazes which aren't good before they're melted into glass. And for a bunch of reasons, I keep it fair.
Yeah.
I guess I use the simplest and most complex things because wood ash and local clay can be very, very chemically complex. Especially, every tree type species has a different composition. Where they
Sure.
grow makes a huge difference.
Okay.
I used to work as a winemaker, and we did barrel tests of the same wine in different barrels from different forests that were all within 100 miles of each other. And the taste difference is huge.
Huh.
And you get that same effect if you burn a tree and have its ash and put it on a pot.
Now, did you say local clay?
Yeah, so this cup is glazed in with ash and a white clay from off island. But this vase is glazed with local clay, spot and wood ash. And the spot where I am, and a lot of other spots on the island, were at one point the bottoms of bays. So they have marine clays
Yeah.
that are really high in calcium from marine critters, and then also iron and manganese and other trace.
Was this from the bottom of a pond?
Well, the clay body
Yeah.
is one that I purchase
Okay.
because all of our clays that I've found so far are what you'd call low fire clay. It melts into a glaze at my temperatures. And I
Okay.
can use just straight local clay as a glaze, but the color breaks really interestingly when you mix it with ash.
Interesting. So can I see that? Okay. So is this glaze, these lighter colored spots?
So these lighter colored spots are, I've taken what's called a slip, which is, I've taken this white clay and mixed it up into a slurry and then brushed on really coarsely.
Okay.
So it's a dark clay with a white clay applied over it, and then a mix of ash and clay over everything.
So that's not like scored into the pot. That's on top of the pot.
That's
right?
on top of the pot,
Okay.
but I'm brushing it with basically a small broom. It's a
Really
very
cool.
coarse brush,
Beautiful piece.
but it gives really cool texture.
And it's this dark brown because of the glazes and the ash, or is that just a darker clay?
Well, it is a darker clay. It's a dark brown clay, and then where the fire hits it, it gets dark brown and shiny. And it actually, with the glaze, it's a little lighter, but it's glassy and breaks more greenish. And
Do you glaze on the inside of a vase like that?
yeah,
Okay. Beautiful stuff. And then I think we also have a photo from the studio tour, maybe? Tell us about this.
so this picture was right up against the fire mouth and at the top. I can tell because one of the effects of adding soda to the fire is that where it really heavily hits, it starts to bleach out the clay. So it's the same dark clay body as the vase is, but you see on the handle and on the top edge, it started to turn white, and that's where it's gotten a heavy deposit of soda ash. And then a little down from that, there's sort of a matte light brown section, and that's wood ash deposit on the shoulder. And then further down from that, it's kind of dark and shiny, and that's what you'd call flashing, when where the flames are hitting it.
It's really interesting because it's a relatively rough texture, but it still has that beautiful shine to it. It's very interesting. So how many things do you fire at a time?
About 100, give or take.
Oh, really?
So it's the chamber is maybe 3 feet by 3 feet square over 2 fireboxes there, and depending on the size of the pieces, somewhere between 90 and 120 pieces.
So they're pretty densely then, right?
Yeah, I pack it really densely.
Yeah. So then you get this interplay of where
Yeah.
the fire is reaching up wherever it wants
Yeah,
to.
the
but
flame goes through different channels depending on what's there. And then also, one of the most crucial aspects for how a pot ends up looking is how it cools. And so the pots provide a lot of the thermal mass to keep them cooling a little slowly.
Right.
Quicker cooling will tend to create brighter, glossier colors to an extent, and slower cooling will tend to create matte surfaces.
When you're placing the items into the kiln, do you have a rough idea of how they're going to fire, or is it just a surprise when you open it up?
No, I have a rough idea of how they're going to fire, but it's always... I know spots that are cooler and spots that are hotter, and where tends to get the most flashing and ash. But it's...
In the end,
It's within a range.
yeah, you could still be surprised.
Wood firing especially is hugely variable, and the chance for things to go wrong is pretty large. And I've had kiln loads where I got 20% out, and I've had kiln loads where I got 97% of what I put in out.
How often do you fire the kiln?
Well, it depends on the time of year.
Okay.
This time of year, I'm going like once a month, once every 3 weeks. But once a burn ban comes in the summer, I can't fire. And I like to back off before that.
Well, it's selling season anyway. Right?
Yeah, well, it's selling season, but sometime around August, I usually run out of pots. And then again, getting ready for the Christmas markets,
Right.
I might be firing as often as once every 2 weeks.
Did you say up to 14 hours?
Yeah.
So do you have to tend to that fire the entire time?
Yes.
So your family kind of dreads those days? Dad's going to be a little tied up for 14 hours?
A little bit.
14
Well,
hours. Do you start as early as possible?
when I do, I tend
Yeah.
to start around dawn, whenever that is, or in the winter before dawn.
That's a commitment.
I
And you really probably can't get very far from it, right? You
No,
gotta keep a close eye.
sometimes someone will come and help me, and I'll be able to take like 10 minutes and do something else.
It takes that much care.
Yeah, right at first, for the first, say, 4 hours, you can kind of do something for 15 minutes and walk away. But once it's starting to get up to temperature and you're having to stoke it more often, not only can you not walk away and do something, but like even having a sufficiently involved conversation
It takes that much concentration.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're constantly feeding it and
Yeah.
making sure that flames, I guess, right?
You
You
want to,
never want to lose the flame, right?
heating something up to a white hot temperature with wood is involved. Like that's at the
Right.
limit of what the medium will do.
How much wood do you go through in 14 hours?
About a quarter of a cord. It's a really efficiently designed kiln.
Yeah.
So
That's
like,
a lot.
for reference, the big onagamas that fire for 3 days or half a week, they'll go through a cord a day or more.
And what kind of wood do you like for this?
I like starting on alder for a nice clean flame for the first half or so, and then I tend to switch to a mix of fir and pine for the next while, and I'll usually finish on like split fir. And maybe add in a bunch of, depending on what effect I want from the cooling, I might add fir bark to
Interesting.
for the while it's cooling to, it's called reducing it. You make a really oxygen-starved atmosphere, and that will actually pull oxygen out of iron in the glaze and the clay body and change red iron oxide to black iron oxide and change how the pot looks pretty
Where
substantially.
did you learn all this?
Well, I read a lot of books.
Okay.
But we just moved to North Carolina. I was doing classical composing and abstract painting, but mostly I was taking care of our 8-month-old son while my wife was a professor at University of Chapel Hill. And we moved down the street from a community clay studio, and they were offering classes. And I was like, oh, I kind of always want to do pottery. Maybe I could take a class for my birthday. And a lot of potters have this experience, but I started and kind of fell in love with the medium. And
Did you learn about stoneware and these more, what would I call it? It's not minimal. It's kind of minimal, well, at least in the world of glazing. Where did you start to move into this?
really quickly, I figured out that this was aesthetically what I was interested in.
Right, right.
It wasn't something that we could do at that studio. It was electric kilns and cone 6, but the guy who was teaching there knew about this, and then North Carolina has one of almost the only continuous clay tradition that's was in operation in the U.S.
Really?
And the University of Chapel Hill has one of the best pottery collections in the country.
Really?
And
Who
so their
knew?
public library had a great amount of stuff, and I read a whole bunch. And like I grew up on the outer island, in the outer islands. I was used to a very handmade way of living, and so philosophically,
The outer islands of,
in the San Juans,
right. Waldron?
Yeah, I grew up on Waldron and
Yeah.
left for school because
Okay.
the Waldron school only goes through 8th grade.
Right.
So a lot of this aesthetic in pottery is influenced by the English arts and crafts tradition and that philosophy, and then its counterpart in Japan, the Mingei folk art movement. And those philosophies really resonated with me. And also, like, just the interaction between the potter and their medium. Like, as a composer, I always wanted to work with living performers because another person's interpretation of my ideas was what I was interested in. A lot of composers I knew really wanted to work in computer music, so they got exactly what they put on.
Right.
And this is a very similar set of ideas through a different lens.
So you came back to the San Juans with a family, with a passion for pottery in tow, all of these things. When did you come back?
About 7 years ago. We came back to visit family. My wife Lauren had just renegotiated her contract at UNC and kind of went, what the heck are we doing chasing academic jobs around the country? We should just go back to the islands. And after my first pottery class or so, I was like, you know what, this is something I like. It's something I have talent in. And it's something I could take back home where
Right.
trying to write for chamber orchestras and, opera houses and choirs wasn't really something that was easy to base here. So,
Sounds like you're going to be doing this for a while.
sure hope so.
Yeah. It relaxes you.
I don't know if sometimes it relaxes me.
You're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So in your history, I heard mention of winemaking.
Yeah. I like making stuff in a lot of mediums, but after I got my master's degree, I was not yet getting enough commissions to do that alone, and so we just moved to Philadelphia for my wife to do her doctorate, and visited every winery in the area, of which there are more than you would expect, and I applied to the one I thought was the best and got a job there. Made wine for a few years, and then we moved to Italy, and I did a 2-year program with the Italian Association of Sommeliers.
Wow.
And have kept on doing things in the wine world to some degree ever since. I'm the wine and beer buyer at the San Juan Food Co-op.
Oh, okay.
Which,
cool.
lets me keep my toe in it without being fully immersed.
Well, this is beautiful work, and I hope that we can stop by on the 1st or 2nd of June to see more of it, maybe buy a piece. So I really appreciate you coming in. This is beautiful, beautiful work, and thank you for sharing your story, and I'm really glad you brought your family back.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. So, very nice. Thank you very much. So that's Jeremy Jennings, yet another great artist. The quality of the artwork and the quality of the people that we've had through here associated with the studio tour is just amazing, humbling. So, Jeremy, thanks for keeping up the string of tremendous artists with a great story to tell. And we'll see you soon.